It looks like we are going live. We are live.
Sommer, what's the name of it, please?
Welcome, everyone. My name's Sommer Joy Ramer, and we are here bridging the gap. And this is a conversation live streamed over the Compassion Games, Survival of the Kindest Facebook page, and rippling out through many allies that are supporting this conversation, supporting this healing around racial injustice. And I want to welcome my co-host and all of the other amazing women that are here, a part of this conversation that we're going to have for 2 hours. And Antionette Rootsdawtah is here co-hosting with me. And all of these women, we're all, in a sense, co-hosting this experience together. About a month ago, we sparked this conversation through the live streams, and there was such an amazing, speaking for myself, experience that I shared with many of these sisters and a few new sisters that are here with us tonight, that it felt right in the sense of my pledge was to hold more space for these types of conversations and where we're at about a month later. So Antionette Rootsdawtah, I just want to grateful to have you in my life and in all of so many of the different circles that we are in together, and learning about so many of you too and your work in the world. And may this be a blessed 2 hours for us to share live. Those of you that are live, please comment and engage with us. We're watching the comments as well. So thank you and welcome. My heart is wide open.
Thank you so much, Sommer Joy. Always bringing joy. All right. So before we get into it, before we get started, we usually start with a prayer to center ourselves and to ask for guidance and wisdom. And are there any volunteers who would like to lead us into a prayer? All right.
I'll do that, sister. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
If we just close our eyes for a moment and begin to breathe through our nose. Feeling our hearts. And simply feeling this moment. Connecting to each other in this circle, in this sacred circle. And feeling our purpose. I would like to thank the great heart of these sisters here and now. I would like to thank them for sharing their integrity and sharing their wise thoughts as we reach out, creating a large hoop, a circle of light, and thanking our humanity for receiving what we are radiating, and connecting to our earth and the big heart of our humanity, the big heart of our planet, and feeling that grace, and connecting out further still into our galaxy and realizing that we're part of a great system of light. And may all hearts connect, and may we realize that we're all connected. May all people find justice, soy, and peace in their hearts. And we thank that great spirit, that great wisdom and grace for guiding us here and now. Ashe. Ahe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. So to get into the recap, this is going to be very brief and everything. I'm going to go ahead and open this up on the 5 W's, which we started off with white supremacism and the things that led up to white supremacism. And one of the ones that we did discuss last month was white privilege. Does anybody want to give me like a brief description of how they see what white privilege is? Okay, I'll start. I'm sure you guys have something to say, but I'll start. So I hear a lot of comments from people or from other people that say that they don't understand white privilege because they have suffered or they've been poor and they haven't had anything given to them or handed to them, and not understanding how that also entails like how we actually live our own lives. For instance, the economic structure from the benefits of racism from slavery has created an economic diaspora between middle class, poor, and the rich. There's a lot of old money, and because of old money and because of like some of the things that we just discussed before, like redlining, these issues have affected like Black communities, Black and brown communities economically, also within the school systems, because in certain schools, there's what they say is like a good sized classroom is like 15 to 20, but in a lot of inner city schools, it's basically 30 to 40. They don't have the same advantages of having teacher-student ratio, also as well as qualified teachers based on where they live, because many women have gone to jail or prison for actually putting their child in a different zone, you know, based for them going to school. And also the political and the justice, we don't have the same amount of representation in our politics as far as local politicians on the local level and also on the national level. As far as our health priorities are concerned, the hospitals that are within the neighborhoods, the justice systems, as far as inequality between Black and brown people who are subjected to police harassment, convictions, brutality, and also filling up our prisons. So even though people have said, oh, Pato, you know, you're a successful Black man. And it's like, that doesn't necessarily mean that everybody who is successful is not subjected to some type of systematic racism, some type of inequality, the same type of racial profiling or harassment, or within our school jobs, economics, and justice system as well, too. Does anybody else want to elaborate? I see a chat.
It's also a layer, and this is, I think, what we're coming up against quite a bit is that being able to walk away from racially events and experiences that are racially charged or oppressive. So if you have dark skin, you cannot walk away. If you have light skin, if you have white skin, you can never talk about it. You never have to deal with it if you don't want to. So this is also part of that particular privilege.
Mm-hmm. If you notice, like, I see a lot of videos being popped up again, yes, Sylvia, about Jane Elliott and her blue-eyed, brown-eyed experiments that she used to do back in the 60s, and then later on the Oprah show, and then the classrooms. And you saw the people getting all upset because they had on the green collar or the blue collar, or they were segregated, and people were so upset and so mad, and they walked out. And she says, you could walk out, but people with color cannot walk away from these types of issues. This is something that we're in our skin tone that we have to go through 24/7 every single day for the rest of our lives. It's not something we could just take on or off. It's not the same discrimination as far as the clothes that you're wearing or because you have tattoos or whatever, you know, the way that you look. We can't change the way that we look based on our skin color. Okay, go ahead, Sylvia.
Nobody calls me Sylvia.
Oh, Nebsa, sorry.
I had to change that. That's my computer name.
Nebsa, Queen Nebsa.
I think the one comment that I hear on Facebook about white privilege, it's not that you have been disadvantaged or you have had problems or been set back, but being Black or the color of your skin wasn't the reason. So that always made sense to me. Does it make sense to y'all? So when people say, I have a business partner who's been saving money, $1,000 a month since he was 21 years old. And his sister's a judge, and he's got all these highfalutin people in his family. And he just will not accept that he's benefited from white privilege. What do I do?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes, Summer.
I just want to add in too, and this is something that I think since our conversation we had, I feel like there's a big highlighter over my beloved white friends and family of white privilege, like how present and potent and just up in my face that have awareness to it. And I just would say too, it's like, I've noticed some people that are wanting to show that they care, that are white, wanting to care and share their, use their Instagram stories filled with different caring messages about Black Lives Matter. And then there's this sort of, what the privilege is the ability to be able to take a break. Like I see where people are like, oh, I'm just so tired of this.
Mm-hmm.
Like the privilege is that anyone that's white can take the break. And there's just something about that and then well, when is this going to be over? Like I'm hearing different messages from people that I know in their heart, they care and they want, but it's like, I'm feeling more sensitive to.
Summer, how do you know that? How do you know in their heart that what they're truly saying is, we do care, but we want this to be over? How do you generate that for yourself?
For myself or of the people that I'm hearing people say that?
Right, exactly.
Okay, I mean, because with some people, they're my family, and I know at the core of them, they're good people, they do good things. I'm watching some of the most racist parts of my family make huge changes, even though like there's I would say a mount, like the Himalayas of change that needs to happen, but I'm noticing massive change during this very alive time that this is very present, that like coming forward saying, I am very racist, and then watching things like I'm watching it, the humanity, like by just admitting that they're racist. And I don't want to speak to exactly who this relative is because it's my family and I'm just going to keep it private, but that I've noticed where the most racism awareness that I see in people around me in my life and in my family, that's where the most change has been, of the most like highlighted privilege, racism. And for myself, just that I feel like I want to do the best I can and be leaning in to those conversations, to not, I would say my privilege used to be to just not have the conversation because it was uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. But there's something about privilege and wanting to like lean into, what can I best do with this white privilege? Mm-hmm. What can I do to actually be a part of unity, to be a part of being the change that I wish to see here?
That's one of the things. I did get a call from a friend of mine earlier today. Yes, Ashley, you're next. From one of my friends earlier, and she explained to me that in her family, because of politics, that they can't discuss, politics, and because they feel that it gets a lot of racial tension, and that he's a good person, And I was like, yeah, you know, there's a lot of good people, but there's a lot of good people who have prejudice within their hearts, that it's hard to even admit that you have family. I have family members of my own family who are prejudiced as well too. And they don't even recognize the bigotry or the prejudice or the biases that they have within themselves. So, and they're good people too, but that still doesn't deny the fact that the prejudice is there. One of the things that even happened just recently too was that the Black mayor was called the cops on for going to the bank, for either depositing or removing money from the bank. You know, they racially profiled him and called the police on him, and he was the mayor of that city. You know, that's like, that privilege is not something, I mean, I don't think a lot of white people ever had the cops called on them. And this is a story that we've heard often, way too often. I mean, they even tackled one guy when he left with his bag of money because he wanted to go and pay his car with cash. He was just feeling so good. But I don't think I've heard that story where white people are actually called the cops on for taking money out of their own account. You know, why would they even call the police? All right, go ahead, Ashley.
Yeah, okay. So earlier you asked the question, like, what is white privilege? And I'm sitting with it because, I mean, for me, the first time I spoke about this was almost 10 years ago in college, you know, so I'm at a phase now in my own understanding and development as a human being where I want to go deeper. I want to go deeper into it. And where I want to allow my spiritual understanding of the heart and the formation of the heart and how prejudice occurs and stuff like that to really inform the language that I use around privilege as well. And something that I noticed in talking to my family members and Sommer's contribution to the conversation really brought this up for me, was that there was the ability to deny what was happening. Like the privilege and comfort, which, you know, again, comes in various forms. And, you know, even outside of the racial conversation, people by and large are able to deny many of the world's issues, whether consciously or subconsciously. But when we bring it back into the racial conversation, that is something that I found quite tricky, challenging, and satisfying to work the kinks out of with people in my family. Like to start making it personal. Like, what if I, you know, what if the tables were turned and I was being attacked, I was being lynched, or I was being this or that, and then letting that sink in to my white family who haven't had to think like that, right? Because their privilege has allowed them that you know, comfort. But turning the tables and getting them to think that way so that they could no longer deny the pain and suffering one might be experiencing as a result of an attack on their skin color. Because there's almost a complex difficulty, to like empathize and wrap one's head around something that you just don't encounter on a regular basis, you know? And that is what a lot of white people don't see it. There's a blindness and there's a lack of knowing. And this allows them to deny the reality that many others are facing. So I just wanted to contribute that to the conversation.
I would love to add to the last two things that were said. And I also want to say my name. I'm Alexandra Love. I do anti-racist work from a spiritual perspective. And there's a couple things. One is I love these comments. And there's one thing that sparked in me when Sommer was talking, that is, the more and more I do anti-racist training with people, the more of these panels I sit on and immerse into sort of what's happening now and what's happening now. I am highly interested in people understanding white privileged. And what I'm more interested in is how they use that white privilege. That is what I'm most interested in, because everything, we have such power in us, we don't even know. And when we have something we're facing that like white supremacism, whether we're consciously doing or not, that has such power and density and momentum in our world. And okay, so we can't just get rid of it like that, right? And we have to unravel, we have to dissipate a lot of this density and slow down this momentum. I want to introduce this idea of putting a saddle on it, of the white privilege that came out of white supremacism, and directing it where we want to go. So that was my way of explaining. I really want people to use their I'm so interested in what happens when, recognize white privilege, sure, learn the history. Yes, it's important to understand the anatomy, and then use it relentlessly. And the other thing I wanted to say about what Ashley just said is white supremacism, one of the characteristics, because this is something that it took me a while to kind of like sort out for myself. And that is, how is it that we can look at a group of people or person who are in pain and empathize and go, oh, or like start to internalize and be like, yeah, I could see how, or this was like when. And part of white supremacism dictates that when it's about Black people with dark skin, that we don't do empathy. This is how you see these pictures of lynchings, and people are like on dates at lynchings, right? That's in our culture. This was not that long ago. This is still happening now. So this is one of the things that for people who are watching, one of the reasons that it can be flabbergasting when you're seeing people, friends, family members who for some reason can't internalize or feel they're empathetic about something, but not about this. It's part of the white supremacism it's part of the structure of white supremacism.
I also want to say that this exact nuance that you're speaking of, Alexandra, is what I understand to be the origins of the divide of humanity, the othering of each other, like the lack of awareness around the oneness of all of mankind. Granted, we have, maybe based on our cultures and the geographies that we've evolved in, we have different strengths and opportunities, etc. But the way that I've always seen humanity on a micro and macro scale is that we sort of complete the puzzle together. So yes. And for whatever reason, there's so much warring. And if you look at it from a yogic perspective and you focus on the root chakra, this is your survival instinct. Like we evolved in tribes. So there was clashing with, between different tribes, even people of the same color, fighting and enslaving each other. But the idea, the notion that we are separate, that we are not actually all interdependent, and that we don't, like, the idea that if one is suffering, all suffer, is not quite embodied in the white body yet, I think. And there's the cultivation of the emotional intelligence that I think is a huge factor in the future, like the ongoing development between the races, like along with the spiritual work, which is why I teach yoga, why I've been practicing for over 10 years. And I don't mean just asana, but I mean the really deep and subtle aspects of the spiritual practice. And I am by no means an expert, but I can say that it has informed me and informed my worldview and enhanced my ability to perceive all beings as one. And I just wanted to throw that in there.
I just wanted to say that I think you're right when you talk about the elephant being in the room and the blinders are on. But I think white privilege, the advantage of white privilege is being able to turn it off. You can turn it off, you can turn it off. My Blackness doesn't ever go away. So although I might speak in this tone, I can walk out these doors and be judged based upon the color of my skin. So I'm still trying to, I had a funny situation happen with my neighbor. I walk down the street and I love his kids. You know, I consider myself to be part of the village when it comes to children. And so I walked up to his house and was saying hi to him. And he was saying, oh, shoot, you know, I was sure hoping that nothing was going to mess up our relationship. He's Caucasian. And I looked at him and I perplexed and I said, why? He said, because, you know, all this stuff going on. He said, look, I just want to tell you that I work hard and you know, I've done everything I needed to do to be where I'm at. And I looked at him and I said, so have I. I said, but the difference is the value. The value is what changes everything. You are able to work hard. You are able to do what you need to do. And you will receive the credit and the value for that as not only as a white man, but as a white person. I got to work 4 times harder and I've got a degree, a doctor's degree. And so my work has got to be 150%. My mother taught me that long ago. Mm-hmm. You have got to do 150% while other people do 100. Mm-hmm. When they see you, that will be the first thing that they see. So white privilege to me says you can turn it off and you can turn it on whenever you want to. Mm-hmm. But light stays on the color of my skin, always.
Mm-hmm. I think Mira Michelle, I think you had something to say, and Queen Nepsa and Nini.
What I was going to say is all of us here are women, and being women in a patriarchal society, we can all, I think, identify with the misogyny that's present and heavily present. And so imagine that, I mean, as a woman, you have to work 10 times harder to get to the spot where you want to be when it's a boys' club. And there's a whole host of other things, you know, keeping your integrity and, you know, being seen, taken seriously by men and all of that. Imagine the color. Imagine your color is brown, dark brown, any hue of dark brown, anything light, anything darker than what you are now. And you're not considered to be part of the white race, as they call it. This is what we're talking about. It's not difficult to make that stretch of the imagination where you know what it's like to be a woman in society. Think about what it's like to have those discriminations also based upon your color, so that if you're a white woman, you will get more concessions. You think you're barely getting it and you're barely scratching the surface and you're fighting tooth and nail and, you know, wearing chastity belts and all this stuff just to get to the top in an ethical way, in a way that sits right with your spirit. But imagine having the extra obstacle of the paint job that you've been given. Mm-hmm. And, you know, there's nothing wrong with that paint job, but, you know, society says that there is when you live in a white supremacist society. And that's a principle, that's an imaginary thing. But when you live in the system of white supremacy, that's the extra thing. You're not getting called for interviews because of your name. Or if you're interviewing online, they're going to see you and you're, you know, possibly out of there just because they see that you're Black. And, you know, whatever qualifications you have may not pale, you know, may pale in comparison to whoever they have in mind. Or perhaps, you know, and this is based on the bias of the person who's interviewing you. It may not be necessarily the view of the company or the view of the company owner. It's who you're meeting on the front line and their issues. So you're combating that as well, and it makes it that much harder and that much more frustrating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you, Nini. Mira Michelle?
Thank you. I find myself framing and reframing. I sort of feel like I'm holding at the moment. And
okay, I thought I saw your hand raised.
Yeah, I did. I was going like this.
Mhm.
as in love, sending love to my sisters when they talk. So I'm doing this, so you know, just feel me saying, yeah.
All right.
But I'm gonna keep holding and keep listening.
All right, thank
till it
you.
comes.
All right, Queen Nebsa.
I feel like I have to introduce myself because I know all of you from watching the replays, but you don't know me. Well, some of you might know me from Facebook. But anyways, my story is a little bit different because I was born by both African-American parents from Detroit. I was born in Ann Arbor, Michigan, but at the age 16, and in a pretty much predominantly, well, not pretty much, I would say 99% white community, affluent communities, and I think there are maybe 6 Black people in my elementary school, and there were only 8 in my junior high school, and half of those were bussed in just to meet the quota. So when I was 16, my father decided to leave America. He'd had enough, and we moved to Africa. So I went from white bread to Africa. Now, when we got to Africa, we were the specialists on African Americans, go figure. And so we started like Black History Month celebrations, and we were bringing in jazz musicians and all these things, right? So I lived in Africa, except for the university in France, and then came back to America when I was 35 years old. This is where my African American experience really started, because the only other African Americans I was around had the same last name as me. They were my sisters, right? So I actually approached Blackness from a very, a little bit of an academic point of view through reading books. And I used to call it my sociological study, right? I'm gonna learn about Black people because I am one. For the first time in my life, I'm Black in an African-American environment. So that's where I come from. So recently I started asking a lot of questions, like processing my own experiences, my own traumas. Let me just go out and say it. My own traumas, racist encounters with all the Black Lives Matter. And it's just like a lot of flashbacks, a lot of memories circling around in my head. So I just started asking questions on my Facebook page to find out how other people are feeling, how other people are processing. So we just started processing all together. And I would ask questions like, when's the first time somebody called you the N-word? Or has a police officer ever pulled his gun on you? And how do you feel about interracial sex relationships? And just all kinds of questions, you know, 1 or 2 a day. And got quite a big following of, you know, thousands of people showed up and started answering. It's slowing down now. Mm-hmm. Now, to the topic about white privilege. One of the things that I read years ago was that a Black man in America, and I'm sure there were some specifics I don't remember, but he is reminded 17 times a day that he is a Black man, not a man, a Black man. And then I realized that when I look in the mirror and I'm tying my head wraps in the morning, I do not see a woman. I see a Black woman, right? And a lot of that's very positive because I'm very proud of my Blackness. You know, when I put on my big earrings, you know, when I tie my head wrap and whatnot. And so I decided to ask the people on my Facebook group. And let me mention that my Facebook friends are from all over the world because they're attracted to my business, which has head coverings, hats, and headbands and whatnot, but also because I've lived in quite a few different places. And I just have a multi-ethnic crowd of people around me. And so the conversations tend to be very interesting. And one thing I noticed from that question, I think I asked a question about that. When you look in the mirror, who do you see? Do you see your race first, or do you see yourself as a person? And the only people that saw themselves as a human were the white people in the group. And some Black people would say that, and I would say, okay, strip away all the spiritual talk and all that. What do you really see when you look in the mirror? And so that I can say is white privilege, to look in the mirror and see yourself, and not see yourself in racial terms, even if you like your race, you know, whatever, but to be able to not have it put in your face or basically your own self-image has to do with your racial group as well as your personality or whatever else you want to see when you look in the mirror. Am I making any sense?
Yes, you are. All right, thank you. And then I'm going to move on into the next one because we only started on the first W and we're already 40 minutes in. So we're going to get over into the next 4 Ws and then get into our commitment pledges and then the events. So the next one is, and it's interesting because some of the points that you guys had made, and then I'm seeing some of the comments on the live feed about the empathy. So we've gone from the white privilege, and then when we start to move into empathy, how far are we going into empathy where empathy starts to turn into white fragility and white guilt? And they're almost kind of like they're two separate subjects, but it does start to move into that. So if anybody wants to give me an example of white fragility, white guilt. All right, go ahead, Ashley. I see you going.
Sorry, I was just chatting with a white gentleman friend of mine on Facebook about stuff related to this the other day, and he started talking about like essentially sacrificing privilege. Mm-hmm. And I, again, having danced with this work for quite some time, and more recently even more so, what I expressed to him, my understanding of doing the work as a white person, and this is just where I'm currently at, what I'm doing is not going into the guilt and not going into the fragility, like not becoming so emotionally engrossed that I become powerless in the situation, because I think as an ally, it's very important to maintain my power and stand strong for those around me and just hold space for people to speak, for people to be heard, to listen, as Sommer was saying earlier, and to create space, to recognize the enoughness in my privilege to the extent that I don't need to grasp for any more. I don't need any more. I don't need more power. I don't need to be heard more. It is not about me. It is to an extent if you go back and see it as we're all in this together. And of course, naturally, we're all going to have feelings around this. Anyone who says they don't, well, they need to do some work, right? Mm-hmm. And there's a gradient between not enough and too much, right? And it's, for me, it's about finding somewhere in the middle and creating space mm-hmm. for people to pick themselves up by their own bootstraps and to give them, like, to honor them and to allow them their dignity and to allow them to figure it out in a gentle way and in a nurturing way without feeling bad and dropping some sort of negative emotional bomb in the situation, right? Because that does nothing productive for anybody. Yes. In my experience. In fact, it just makes it muckier and messier, and it screws with everybody. And I'm really not interested in screwing with anybody's inner peace at this time.
I'm gonna get into that as far as, you know, the white active allies. That's actually, you know, number 5W. But right now we're talking about what white fragility is and what white guilt is, and how the two actually encompass and start to interweave with each other, and where it goes from empathy into severe guilt or defensiveness as in fragility when we start to talk about racial issues. So does anybody want to touch on that? Okay, Mira?
I would like to touch on that thing, and I would like to pick up where our sister, Nipsa. I have a bridge for that, and it's going a little bit down the healing rabbit hole, let's say, because you made a very interesting comment, and that was basically, when you look in the mirror, what do you see, right? And I would like to give another perspective to that, because people of color look in the mirror and they may see their color first, and they may have that this may elicit a certain feeling, a certain vibration of pride, of connectedness, right? And I presently live in Europe, and I've been ping-ponging from living in Europe to the United States all my life. Is my mother's English, right? And what I have realized about Europe per se is that the Europeans had their tribal identities completely almost erased, right? Completely. So, and that feeling of not having their real ethnicity that really grounds them to the planet and gives them a sense of being human through their roots, so to say, is one of the biggest trauma European and European Americans carry, right? So this is a projection, I feel, onto people of color, because people of color have not been so long in that rabbit hole of not feeling a sense of pride, a sense of soul, a sense of connectedness. And so what is really happening? That's what I ask myself here. And sometimes I just like to come from a completely different perspective, because then we can go further down this rabbit hole and we could keep looking at why am I the object of racism, right? And I can hold that for a while. I can keep holding that, but sometimes I like to spin it around and say, why is a feeling of not feeling connected to the self being projected onto people that very much can feel this connection, right? So let's keep spinning it and let's keep realizing it from different sides. Or people of color will keep getting pushed into this victim consciousness, you know? And I have seen people that I've had intense experience. I've seen people on the planet have intense experiences, but I've never seen a more resilient and a more heartful and soulful people than Black American people and African. I went to Africa for the first time this year. As a person of color, as a Black woman, I was on my knees. You know, I was on all fours with gratitude, being on that soil, you know, and the heart, the connectedness, my African family embraced me with, you know, who gets to experience that? Let me tell you something, that's not really going to happen when European Americans go to Europe. Not necessarily. I mean, I've lived in England, I live in Germany presently. I'm dealing with this European trauma, right? So let's put that into the pot and stir it, because we are all individuals also, and we all carry trauma. We all do on some level, right?
Thank you.
But we need to even out this playing field and see what's coming next. So thank you.
So back to the question for our viewers out there, because many of them are white and they are curious to know, what is white fragility and what is white guilt? I'm just holding back because I'm trying to give others a chance to speak on this subject, but you know, I can definitely dive all into this. I can get right down into the nitty gritty. All right, Queen Nepswell, I'll go ahead and let you say something. Go ahead.
I'm just gonna take a stab at it because nobody else did.
I'm ready whenever you are, girl.
Anyways, what I think white fragility, first of all, is a term coined by Dr. Robin DiAngelo.
Mm-hmm.
He studies whiteness studies, as she calls it, whiteness studies. So she learns about white people. So white fragility is when you are able to, well, let me say the result of white fragility is being able to shut down any conversation about race because you feel somehow attacked or somehow confronted by the mere mention that you are a white person. And then signs of white fragility, the ones I usually get are people inboxing me saying, Nepsa, you're being so divisive just because I say black and white. No, I didn't create those divisions. They do exist, right? And so just mentioning it. White fragility is when, what else? I haven't read
you're on the right track, because white fragility is mentioning the words white or black, and the term that they fling back at you is you're being divisive, you're being racist for mentioning race or talking about racism, you are full of hate because, you know, we're talking about equality, so how can you talk about racial equality and all of a sudden be full of hate because you are asking for equality and justice? So the words white or black is what actually offended them. If you notice that every time you mention Black Lives Matter, you're going to have at least one person, if not more than that, who's going to come in there and say all lives matter. The same people who will sit there and say all lives matter will go and also say blue lives matter. So if you could say blue lives matter, which is like, you know, okay, blue lives matter. So it wasn't about, you know, all lives matter. Now you're talking about blue lives. So the offensive word was actually Black. It was never about anything else. It was never about equality, that we're all equal and everybody is the same and we should all be treated the same, because all of a sudden they just separated into blue lives matter, or why can't we say white lives matter? The problem was the word Black, you know, so the fragility that's happening all across as we're seeing is because you mentioned the word Black lives matter, Black pride, Black empowerment, Black equality. It's the word Black. And because that word is so offensive, their fragile selves sit there and start to fall apart by hearing those words, Black or white, or if you mention white people do this or white people do that. But I have to tell you, if you hear people sitting there saying, dear white people or whatever, they're not saying every single white person on the planet. That is not every single white person. We know there's good and bad in every single race. We know there's good and bad in every single culture. It's not an all. But if we start to see signs and exhibiting coming from a particular race, which the only people who are mad about Black Lives Matter is really white people, or, you know, some white people, you know, if we have to go there and like really be specific, but it's not trying to be, you know, offend anybody, but nobody else is so against the words of the fragility. Nobody else is being fragile or upset about hearing these words being used. All right, we'll stay in the fragility and then we'll go into the guilt. All right, go ahead.
Can I just say this real quick? I just want to say this real quick. White fragility means to me this. I want to, especially the empathy part says this, rah, rah, rah for your cause, but not in my neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? White fragility says, you know, there are stress-free white communities. You know, they're built for that, built for white community privilege. That is just the truth, right? And so fragility to me says, I empathize with you as much as I can. I will shed a tear. I will even maybe pick up a sign and walk down the street with you. But when that's over and done, you go home and I'm going to go back to my community.
Mm-hmm.
And also the community helps foster the fragility.
Yes,
because it's a sheltered environment. So you feel what I've observed is that there's a discomfort with the other even more,
right?
Because you're afraid to go to, you know, I don't know, you're afraid to go to Manchester in LA and get your Roscoe's chicken and waffles. You'd rather go to Hollywood because that feels more comfortable to you.
Right.
You want to go to the hood where it all came from. You're afraid we're all going to come after you with pitchforks and torches. You know,
right.
what is that? Or
can I just say something
wouldn't
on that?
be caught dead at a predominantly Black social gathering, because I guess we're all going to attack you for being there. You know, what is the mentality? Where is that coming from? It comes from not having any Black friends, not having any close Black friends. I don't mean the chick who sits in the cubicle next to you, or who's in your department at work, or is maybe your son's, you know, mother, your son's friend's mother, or whatever. I mean, like, really people who you hang out with. When you don't have that, then there's a huge mystery with the hair. What is your hair? What is that? One woman said to me, my hair was up in one bun, and she goes, what is that? What do you call that? And I said, she goes, that's not a ponytail. I said, no, it's not. It's a bunny tail. And she goes, it's because I know it's not. And she was harping on the fact that it was not a ponytail. I was like, no, it's a bunny tail. My hair is fluffy. It's in the shape of a bunny tail. Ponytail is straight. I don't have a ponytail. But she really, that was a question for her. That comes from not having any Black friends. you wouldn't say something so stupid or so insulting, you know? So that there's, and then when you try to address that, then you get the rear back because I'm not used to this. I'm not used to being called out on my shit. I'm not used to, you know, anyone talking to me. I'm not used to even a Black person speaking without breaking verbs. I'm not used to a Black person looking me in my eyes. I'm not used to this Blackness. And it's not even Blackness at that point. It's just humanity with a different skin color. And then all the stuff that comes out in the media, whatever you've been fed from that, and whatever your racist family was teaching you. And, you know, it's reinforced with the stuff that you see on television or hear on the radio and all that jazz. And so that all comes from not having close Black friends in your midst, because then you would understand a lot more and it wouldn't be so alarming.
Mhm.
And so, and I think to answer your question, I think that white fragility is a lack of esteem in white identity. And there's a reason for that. You know, there's no fault there. There's a reason why there's lack of esteem in white identity, because it's a made up fake thing that's kind of bullshit.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's fragile.
We all got screwed.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So that's when I think of white fragility, that, like, to me at the base, that's what it is. Lack of esteem in that particular identity. That is
Right,
the white
exactly.
identity.
Right.
I have to go in because one of the things that, you know, and I've noticed, and I've seen this with my husband a lot of times too, he's not one to speak up on racial issues a lot. He always speaks, you know, on being positive, never give in. And it's very rare when he does. But he's a Black man who's suffered the most than anybody. You know, Black men go through it the worst than anybody, but he has to maintain and control himself at every level humanly possible as best as he can. And the minute where he even tries to attempt at it with a little bit of love, because, you know, you guys all know how Pato is. He's always exuberating all the love and the compassion and the endearment and a true brother and a friend. The minute he starts to open that little talk there, here comes the victimization. Here comes the offensiveness. And it's like, how in the world is there anything that he could possibly say through his own experiences of living as a Black man be so offensive to you or to any white person, you know, where he's expressing himself, where he's always been a brother and a friend to somebody, but it turns into this victimization, you know, into fragility, you know, and then when they go from the fragility, you know, and they feel like, oh, this man, he just beat me up and whatever. It's like, whoa, where did all that come from? All this heat that he showed. It's like, wait a second, it wasn't even like that. You know, so that's where they take it from the extreme of defensiveness and the extreme of offensiveness. And then some people will sit there and take it to the extreme of the guilt, you know, because deep down inside, then here comes this guilt part. And then they wonder, how do I sit there and like come off from, you know, how can I be that friend or empathetic? And they go from being upset or mad into extreme guilt. And we've seen these examples of extreme guilt because now the white supremacists are using it to fling back upon us by showing us these pictures and examples of people kneeling down, you know, people being made. I don't know who's making these people kneel down and put things around their necks and wearing these t-shirts saying, I'm sorry, and all this, you know, great displays of what. It's like, wait a second, who asked for all of this stuff? I don't even think.
But I think it goes back to what Alexandra said was it's not their fault. There is a lack of esteem. It's just not identifiable in their genetics. Right?
Yeah, white is made up. White is made up. So and I think that what you Antionette and Nichelle have been talking about are some of the events that sometimes get birthed out of the experience of white fragility, but there's also lots of other layers of there's so many different layers of what's going on in the stories you're telling. And also I'd like to insert here that white fragility can play out in many ways. Sometimes it's playing out against Black people. Sometimes it's playing out against white people. And sometimes it's also, I mean, probably all layers of this going on, it's internalized. Who am I? What am I connected to? I'll take, maybe it's this, I don't know, right? So let's remember that too, to sort of support what Mira Michelle was saying, is this sort of like, maybe there's something, how I'll say it is, maybe there's something inside that knows that like this white is not a real thing. So if it's not, if that's where my identity is and what I've been told and educated by the system that I'm in, if it's not that, then what the fuck is it? And having no examples around me to fill that emptiness, fragility can be there too.
Absolutely. I'm sorry. I really do feel that's where all of the neurosis begins, when we really have a lack of a deeper root. We have a cover identity, right? And the deeper root is not active. Then that's going to fall into that fragility. And then it's going to fall into the guilt and a sense of hopelessness and helplessness, right? And everybody's running from this vibration of, I don't want to feel helpless. And then I'm going to look at another people that perhaps feel helpless in certain situations. Oh no, I don't want to feel like that. So I'm going to resort to that sort of behavior. That's what I'm seeing. And we don't need to find a solution for it, but we need to understand that that's a part of the mix, so that people of color do not begin to take that on as their own neurosis.
Mm-hmm. Sister Nepsa?
What you're saying, both of you, a month ago, I wouldn't have really believed it, because I always thought that white people are hyper aware that they're very much at the top of the hierarchy economically and otherwise. But just last week, I was in a conversation very much like this one. And it turns out that two of the women in the group said they have anguish when it's time to check the box of race. You know, for us, it's simple. You know, Hispanic, ethnic, Native, Black, whatever, we just check, right? But apparently for a lot of white people, it becomes very difficult because they don't see themselves as white. They might see themselves as Italian or something else. So I did put that question out to my Facebook group, and I was surprised at how many, what I would just call white people, were checking other rather than white. So that was really perplexing, and I didn't get so deeply into that. The other thing I want to bring is a question mostly for you, Antionette, is where does this idea of white tears come in? White tears, let me describe it, it's usually something we attribute to white women who, if you check them or you say, don't touch my hair, or hey, that's a little bit racist or whatever, the first, or even just something on the professional level, like, or I usually get it because people always try to cut in front of me and stuff. I'm like, wait a minute, did you not see me standing here? You know, and then what you got? Tears, you know, just, oh, you're saying that I'm bad. You're saying that I'm racist. I'm not, just, you know, like so quick, right? So we dug into this a little bit. And on YouTube, I'm finding all these videos of little bitty children, 4 or 5 years old, using white tears on the playground to get their way. They learn really young that they can literally weaponize a situation and shut people down. And white privilege is also a tool for, it's a political tool, right? Because you control, you dominate. If you can stop the conversation and cause people to back off of you, then this is warfare. This is a weapon.
Mm-hmm. So it's a defense mechanism, which again points back to my premise is usually white people know what they're doing. They know what they're saying. They know what they're doing. They know the system that they live in, but things don't change because they like things the way they are. White tears and fragility are defense mechanisms. If you're using a defense mechanism, then you know that you're fighting against something, so that you know something's going on. You know something's going on.
Go ahead, Alexandra.
I just need to add something, because we're starting to get in a place where I want to make sure that we're looking at like a holistic perspective. And so I want to talk about just the roots really quickly that I see of white tears. And if you don't know who Emmett Till is, please look him up. His death is a result of white tears. Mm-hmm. And so now we do this as a culture, all of us, right? We take words to try to label something, because like we're trying to label this thing that we see happening that causes something, and then we label it, and then it can be weaponized. It can be used to help people understand a concept. It depends on who's using it and how it's being used. But I want to acknowledge that white tears is not a recent thing. It actually has a root in how many Black men and women, especially men, died or went to jail or were lynched because of what in the South, everywhere really, but especially in the South. And Emmett Till is a really great example of this story, that this woman said, he was looking at me. You could get lynched for looking at a white woman or getting too close to it, as long as a white woman or white man said, this person did something, help me, right? So, and this is a layer we're seeing in this whole Karen business, which I don't want to get too deeply into that, but what we are seeing is white privilege being played out when it involves someone else, the possibility of somebody Black getting hurt, and sort of overusing this emotional response, which seems out of proportion for us looking on. I also want to add that there's also part of a concept, part of white tears that I think is important to mention is white tears in contrast to the way Black people are allowed to express themselves or disallowed to express themselves. And so you can look at many studies about schools, small children. You can look at studies about how we react psychologically, how we've been taught to react when a Black woman is upset, Sandra Bland, and when a white woman is upset. This isn't the blanket rule, but it's something that is worth looking into and understanding this layer. So if you're watching this and you're looking into white tears, look into the way Black girls get treated differently than white girls, how Black girls get diagnosed differently than Black girls, the way the pain thresholds, the beliefs that are still perpetuated that Black women have higher pain thresholds than white women. It's not just about white tears and what we see with this whole Karen business. It's not just what we see when we're talking about like these interactions we have on Facebook or day to day when somebody's telling me like, I don't like the way you called this out. I'm gonna cry about it and see if people get on my side. It's not just that. That's just like the very surface. It goes there's so many roots to this. So I just wanted to add that in. It's not just these day to day things. It goes deeper. And please look up Emmett Till. That's a really good. It's a really good place to sort of start to understand the roots of what we now are sort of calling white tears.
Thank you, Alexandra. And to answer Queen Nep's question, it's the same thing I was about to go into, because we got to remember, it wasn't even just Emmett Till. It wasn't even just Tulsa. If you look at many of the cities that were actually the Black cities and towns that were actually burnt to the ground, bombed, destroyed, murder, mayhem, killed, raping, pillaging, and whatever, was actually because of white tears. It was a white woman who had cried foul. Either she was having a relationship with somebody else. If you ever see that movie Rosewood, because that's a movie that's still out, and it only came out like in the 80s, but it's a true story of a town in Florida where this woman was having an affair and she blamed a Black man for raping her. And they totaled this town to the ground. And then it has continued on. And just like you said, it was weaponized. It's weaponized in so many ways that people don't even understand, that it was weaponized through Emmett Till. It was weaponized. I just saw a video today, and I think this was up in Michigan, actually, someplace called Oaks. There's, I watched like hundreds of them per day. But this poor guy, he was going to a restaurant, and then he was like, this woman called the cops on him because he looked at her. He looked at her funny. Now there's 5 cop cars. The white lady from the restaurant came out and said he wasn't doing anything. He was coming in here to eat. This other lady said, I can't leave this man alone because look at all these police here. He wasn't doing anything. Why did this woman call the police on him? And then police were like, we have to do our job. They're like, we just told you he wasn't doing anything. He was going to a restaurant. If those women did not stand there and defend him, who knows what could have happened to him? I've seen this happen with my husband when they did this to us in Vegas. And they have it on video where she sat there and said, this black man assaulted me. And I was like, oh, assaulted you how? Where? She hit him. It's the same thing like the Cooper over there in New York. She said there saying, oh my God, he's assaulting me. And they're standing so far back, you know, sitting there saying, who's assaulting
her going through the crowd.
You know, but you know what I'm
Antionette?
saying? If they did not have the video, please hear me out. If they did not protect themselves with this phone, who knows what the hell could have happened to these guys for assaulting a white woman in 2020, right now, today. You know, this is, so the tears thing, and like you said, it could be physical, it could be mental. We're seeing it in conversations. The minute that someone feels like they're being beat up or whatever by some blackness or something, then it's like, oh, I'm a victim, and where is everybody coming in to love and support me and be there for me because I was so offended by a word of somebody speaking a little bit of truth. You know, it was a little bit of truth. If I dropped like a pound of truth on you guys, y'all would be flattened out. Y'all would be like, oh Lord, I just can't take this anymore. It would be so hard because that's why I said that's going to be my new song. You would be angry too. And the way they do treat white tears versus black tears. Sandra Bland, me, I'm telling you, I would be beaten, tased, whatever by the popo because of my mouth. You know, if I sat there and did the mouth that some of these white women are doing to police officers who are like, I want your badge, I want your number, I want this, I want that, I want, you know, all this stuff. If I started, I would have been bop and dragged off or something. I would have been treated like the angry black woman. Look at what they're doing to little black girls. Police 200, 300 pounds on little black girls, jumping them and beating them like they are some kind of animal because of what they said. It's not that they were a threat. It's not, there's no way a little 100-pound girl could do anything to any type of officers. It's what they said. It was them being able to express themselves and be treated in such a different manner, which is unequal. That's the difference between privilege and no privilege.
Ooh. I'm curious to know from our white sisters here, when we talk about white tears, you know, we are just kind of like throwing it out there at you right now. This is our truth. This is our truth for my other sisters here. What do you hear? How are you feeling? What's going on with you guys?
I think white tears is a common problem in youth and the way life is today. I mean, if a girl or a woman or a person doesn't get what they want, they're going to cry about it. And there's nobody really checking and balancing that. I mean, if I don't get what I want, maybe there's a reason why, or, you know, I'm not going to cry about it. Ashley, you're far more eloquent than I am right now, so.
You're both eloquent.
I'm talking a lot more than I did in our last meeting. I think it ebbs and flows, you know. Sometimes I'm like, oh, I have a lot to say, and some days like, nope, I'm just gonna observe. So first of all, I think I mentioned this last time. I grew up, I've had Black friends since I was 5 years old, and I hung out at their houses, and I have multiple, and they came over to my house, and I've had Latin friends, and like, you know, diversity for me, although it was built into my reality from a very young age. I'm no expert in it, and I'm not the best white person in the whole wide world, anything like that. But what I think I'm a lot more comfortable with the conversation than the average white person. And I'm grateful for that. Mm-hmm. The reason being is because I've done a lot of self-inquiry. I've traveled the world. I lived in Africa, in North Africa for 8 months. In a Muslim country, on top of all of that, very different from what a white California girl gets exposed to. And my understanding of white tears, the origins of it probably comes from some combination of having been sheltered and potentially disempowerment of the white woman, right? So like the whole infantilism or the babiness or the innocence around, like built into the white women in the white culture, like, and not knowing how to just stand strong as a woman. And that is something that actually I have learned more from my friends, my female friends of color, than from anybody else. That's not something that I was taught from a young age. However, like to the extent that I know it now, however, I think I was still, my mom had 5 brothers and they were all athletes. My mom survived cancer 3 times as a child. She had a 9% chance of survival. The women in my family are tough, but there are still issues that they've never had to face as a result of white privilege. So at the very least, I had a nice, strong foundation from which to work from. I still have a lot to learn. I believe that this whole fragility, tears, etc., might have a combination of, and I don't want to offend anyone's religious beliefs, but white Christians tend to play a very fragile field. Like there's this whole hush hush, we can't talk, there's a lot of shame, then follows the guilt, right? And I was raised Catholic, and I, didn't really stick with me. Left that at quite a young age. That's what I have to say about white tears and about being a white person who, maybe had more intercultural exposure from a young age, which I'm grateful for. So I hope that helps somehow. There's one more thing, if I can just say something really, really quick.
Sure,
Probably on time. Yeah. One more thing that comes up for me is, oh gosh, I just lost it. Hold on.
That happens to me all the time.
Oh, I had it and then it left.
Right. We're all of this is all leading up to what we're getting into. So the last 2 W's that we're going into before we move on is white liberalism. And we're going to go from the white liberalism into the next phase of white allies, white accomplices, white allyship and everything. So any comments on what white liberalism is?
I definitely have plenty to say about that as well.
Right then.
For me, when I think of white liberalism today, I think of the last march we had here in Los Angeles, where everybody was wearing the pussy hats.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember not feeling like that was my crew.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a woman, and it's about women's issues, and I believe in the precepts that they were marching for, but I also felt like I did not belong, because throughout history, white liberalism has not really spoken to me as a woman of color. So, we may make some progress, but for me, it's still progress for white women and not women of color, because we're still struggling to get an interview when our name is Shaquita Johnson, So the playing field is still not equal. So that's just, stream of consciousness. That's what comes to my mind when you say that.
Summer.
I remember what I was going to say earlier, and I would like to tie it in with.
All right, go ahead. And then Summer.
If I can. I promise, put a hand up if I need to stop, because I can talk and go on. We were talking earlier about fragility and defensiveness as it comes up for white people and their inability to face what's going on. And there may be, my intuition says there might be a fear of, when Alexandra was talking about the roots of these things, and there may be a fear of people, like white people might think that they need to maintain some sort of power, because there might be a fear of then someone from another culture doing wrong on them. There might be this fear of oh, but if I give something up, what's going to happen to me? So there's this victim, there's this strange complex victim thing that might be playing out. And I've probed a little bit into some people who are very challenging to really go deep with, and I've sensed, I've done a little sleuthing. So that might be a thing. It also, I feel comes from a severe lack of understanding around sovereignty. I think a lot of white people do not stand well in their sovereignty as human beings, and they're looking for a hand or help all the time, or they expect the government to fix things. We rely too much on larger systems and less on ourselves, on self-sourcing. And I think that we have a lot more, the lack of substance that we were talking about when it came to Europeans and European Americans not being connected to their tribal roots. I think it plays into this lack of substance that a lot of white people face. And I've had to learn a lot about myself as a young adult because I didn't have that cultural understanding. I had some of it, but not as deep as others do. And then I could say things about liberalism, but I think I'll stop there.
Yeah, I'm gonna let Sommer go, and then I'm gonna go ahead, Sommer.
I just wanted to add a little bit more about before white liberalism, that I realized that there's something about being an emotional white woman, which I just want to say I very much am. And I find as we're talking about white fragility, white guilt, I just wonder a little bit here in the conversation of, do you feel like if you are, especially as Ashley was just talking about, like depth, part of, for me, sometimes when I feel like I'm having a depth of a conversation, there is a potency and maybe in an emotional way of being that I want to engage in, when I feel like there's an emotional kind of ability to be vulnerable. And so I realize in some ways I'm not quite sure the difference between like emotional intelligence and like vulnerability from white women seen as being weak if they're sharing their emotions around this subject. I guess it's just something that I realize I would love a little bit more clarity on. And then the other thing that I was thinking about too around about white fragility and white tears is, I remember when I was like a young girl and just starting to drive my car, and I remember some of my white friends were like, oh, if you speed and the cop catches you, just cry and they won't give you a ticket. Just fake cry, do that fake cry thing and they'll feel so bad for you. And I remember like it's something about learning that. And it sort of is touching on what I would say is this privilege that is so spoiled. Like, I think Mimi said it, spoiled little brat. And that it's almost like nurtured. Like I can remember experiences where even with my mom, if my brother was poking fingers at me and if I just start crying, like, poor me, somehow it's like, there's something I think about that, and I'm really grateful that came up about white tears, that, but I recognize that I have some confusion in myself right now in this conversation around, is it the intention or like fake, like knowing that there's a manipulation behind the tears? Is that what it kind of more is? Like, I think a knowing that I'm using this white tears to get something from it, or to, or yeah, I just realized.
I want to be clear because, only because I know you, so it's easy for me to sit there and describe you as how I see you, because I know you to be a very empathetic type of person. I have a lot of my friends, they bawl at everything that they hear, everything that they see or experience or whatever. And that's why a lot of them can't even handle this type of conversation, because they would be sitting here bawling right now from feeling our pain. It's not an easy thing for all people. Some people will just brush it off and not care. And that will be like the fake white tears of the fragility. And then there's people who are just very, because of the sincerity and because they have no agenda. If a person has an agenda, then, I'll be able to see that coming a mile away. But when you have no agenda and your heart is just open because you sincerely want to learn and you sincerely want to hear, and if you're feeling emotional about something, that's just you being your emotional intelligence. That's you using your intelligence plus your heart kind of working together. There's nothing fake about any of that, so that's just one of the things. So you're very clear in being distinguished between the different types of manipulation because like we said, there's tears for manipulation, and then there's tears for genuine sincerity and heartfelt, unrighteousness, where some people will be able to handle. And just like when we started this thing before, you said, you can tell me anything you want to tell me, I can take it. And I was like, whoa, you just opened up the damn door, because it's like, if you can take it, I'm going to give it to you honestly and with love as a sister, because a lot of people just can't take it. And I don't bother them with it, because it's not like they're not good people. They just can't handle it. They cannot handle hard truths. And you have to give it to them in little bits and pieces in a way that will soften the blow. But for those who are open and willing right now, then let's go ahead and get busy with it. And then they'll start to toughen up later until we actually all get onto the same page. Like, we're actually all going to be there together. Yeah. The white liberalism. Oh yeah. All right, Sister Nepsa, after that. So the white liberalism too is, and this is something that Dr. Quinn brought up from last time. And it's just stuck in my head for so long about receipts. Because since you've mentioned that, about having receipts, I've got a receipt for this because I went to the NAACP, I contributed to that. I've been hearing so many comments from people who said the most outrageous racist things, and then told me how they stood by MLK, how they wrote letters, how they petitioned, how they, did this for the NAACP and all these different things. And they just kept going on and on and on and on. Everything that they did for Black people. And then on top of that, everything that they did for Black people, they came and smacked me back on the face, by saying there is no such thing as racism. There is no systematic racism. There is no inequality. There is none of this stuff. There is no privilege. There's and denouncing everything that we even spoke about. So it's like, how can you tell me you've done all these things for Black people when you're not even acknowledging all the things that Black people are actually talking about? So when I sat there and thought that these were, white liberal friends that were like, yeah, I marched with Martin Luther, or I've done this and I've done that. It's like, you did these things for show and tell. You did these things, you showed me your receipts and you wanted, some recognition. But, when I think about that kind of recognition, I think about, when we go to the nail salon and how you have to get that stamp, you got to get 20 stamps before you get that free, service. Just because you got 2 stamps on what you did for Black people, you still got a long way to go before you're going to get me to notice what you've done. That ain't enough. That's hardly enough. There's a long list, there's all these books written, there's all these articles, there's all these studies of things that actually is on the road to being a good white ally. Nobody has to be 100% white ally right off the bat. That's going to take some time, because we got to dive through the issues of the 5 W's first before we get to the 5th one. But, saying you've done this, and that, I was like, that's a scratch on the surface, like a little scratchy off. All right, come on, when are we going to get to the next one? When are we going to get to the next one? It's like, those are just baby steps. So I think that's another frustrating thing. When we hear that term, from my white fellow friends, brothers and sisters who their intentions mean well, but they it X'd out everything that they were actually doing when they started bringing up everything that they did, Then it all became null and void. It's like, well,
I feel like a lot of white liberals like to sit on their perch of righteousness and white saviorism, and that actually causes, and first of all, it's still systemic, right? So it's not quite grassroots movement stuff. When it comes from top down, there's still the bottom stuff that's missing.
That's true. Anybody else have any thoughts on that before I move on to the next point?
I live in Portland, Oregon, which is one of the most white liberal, I think it might be number 1 in the United States. And I was in a very interesting conversation with a white woman. I don't think she does any anti-racist work, and we're not in a situation where I really want to talk to her that much about it. And she said, she was asking me about my experience, and my experience is I didn't grow up with with identifying with Black or African American, I grew up in international community overseas. So when I got here, it was imposed on me. I went through like this whole identity crisis thing and had to do a lot of discovery and travel through that, right? And so she asked me, she said, and I've lived only in white liberal towns since I've lived in the United States, North Andover, Massachusetts, Boulder, Colorado, and now in Portland, Oregon. And she said something to the effect of, do you think that one of the reasons that you are able to do so much anti-racist work and sit with people in these sessions and do this constantly, be talking about dealing with the trolls and the fragility, all of that constantly, do you think that part of why that is because you live in white liberal towns?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, no, it's because I grew up over here. Why would you think? And I realized after talking to her a little bit, I realized that she thought that there wasn't as much racism, if not at all, in white liberal spaces. In her mind, still, what she sees as racism is like bad racism is like, you know, the Klan members in the South and like people say, you know, saying the N-word and throwing all this in people's faces. And I realized that is still something that comes with white liberalism and is very prevalent in Portland. And it's something that I'm trying to break through, and I see how people are breaking through this. Like, okay, let's talk about microaggressions. Let's talk about deflection. Let's talk about some of these, gaslighting and bypassing. You know, I'm doing a lot of work now on like talking to the coaching industry, which is a very white liberal industry, and the spiritual healing industry, which is also, especially in Portland, a white liberal industry. And so I realized that this is a mentality, especially in white liberal towns, is that we don't really have racism here. That over there is racism. I was like, it like blew my mind. So I just wanted to say that perspective that I experienced in one of the most white liberal towns in the United States.
Thank you for bringing that up, because that is a very good point. I've lived in the South and I've lived in the North, and I felt like, you know, dealing in the South where we feel like we have outright racism, where, you know, people wearing, flying the Confederate flag or wearing hoods or saying the N-word or things like that. That's like that outright overt type of racism. But when it really is a lot of ignorance and a lot of uneducation, you know, of lack of education. But when I go up north, they know better. They're supposed to be, you know, they have all this education, all these degrees in a more diverse community. You know, New York City is a very diverse city, but they have the most horrible, and California is supposed to be so diverse. It's sunny California, you know, but we've got like hate groups within California. Everybody's liberal in California. It's like everybody's not liberal. And even if they are liberal, they still cannot say Black Lives Matter. They still have a subtle ways of racism within our economy, within our jobs, within our justice, within our education, within the neighborhoods that we want to live in. You know, they don't want to be outright because they know it's politically not correct. But the mentality within inside, it almost makes it worse, because at least if I'm dealing with like people in the South who just don't know, because there's a lack of diversity because they don't know Black people, you know, it's like once they get to know Black people, it's like, really, they're just one of us, really. You know, it's when you get to spend time and they haven't had that same kind of experiences. So I'm sitting there, I can't say the South is more racist than the North. I actually feel the North is more racist. You know, I feel white liberalism is more racist than overt racists themselves, you know, and that also happens within our own community, because we have people who are dealing with self-hate as well too, and who just want to be accepted within society. And so it makes them, you know, easier to just, you know, kind of come out against their own. But since we are running out of time, I'm just going to go ahead and move quickly into the next point, which is white allies. We're going to go into the white allies, and then tell me what you guys think as far as like what makes a good white ally, how you can be a good white ally, what is allyship, you know, between Black and white people, all of us standing together, you know, moving together in a progressive way.
I would love to hear from Mimi. I haven't heard much from her yet, if possible.
Am I muted? Okay. Yeah, no, I apologize. Everybody here is so well spoken. It's a little hard to jump in. I don't want to talk just for the sake of talking these days. But I've been working on what active white ally is, and personally, it's really hard right now in the pandemic because I can't leave my house. I mean, except for essential things. So all of my allyship has been online or verbally or financially. And I know that, you know, some people are taking the stance of like, I need to take this time to learn and listen, which is good because that's, I feel like what I'm doing. I'm taking this time where I don't have a job to really reflect on myself and reflect on every Black person I pass. Something I've really learned in the last few months by listening is the Black community is diverse. And I really think about that every time I pass a Black person on the street, and I try to put myself in their shoes. And quite frankly, I just want to hug them all. But I know that that's not acceptable right now because you got to stay distant. You know, again, I'm sorry, my train of thought wanders right now. You know, yeah, I just, you know, as far as being a good white ally, active ally is being honest and sharing myself and being ready to listen. And I mean, I've got a whole list of all my things here of what I'd pledged to do. So I'm trying not to talk too much about my pledge to how I can be a better ally, but learning, sharing, and helping everybody heal. And I've learned that every Black person kind of has their own way that I can help them, or maybe leave them alone even. So just trying to navigate the field of how to be an ally for such a diverse group.
Thank you. Sylvia, you're next. But one thing I want to do is because we are running out of time, is I want to make that the two-part. So the white allies and also Black allies, you know, this is allyship together as sisters, and also part of our pledge to each other. You know, so part of our pledge to each other is also being allies to each other. And I think you set a great example, because I've been following your page as well too, Mimi, and you talk about Black Lives Matter way more often than I do. I would love to myself, but I just know my own crowd can only handle but so much. So I sit there and I kind of space it out and don't, you know, hit them all at once, you know, with too much per day and things like that. So I kind of mix it up and everything. But I've been watching your page, and you've been very, very, very consistent with, you know, preaching and speaking the truth, you know, and I love that your ability to, you know, to be able to learn and to listen while you're still going out there. No matter how you're going out there, at least you're being out there and you're being present. All right, so I'm going to let everybody go around the circle, you know, as far as like what your allyship is to each other and your pledges to each other, or what allyship means. All right, go ahead, Sister Nepsa.
So I'm not going to say too much about allyship, though I do have some experiences there. But I want to say what it isn't. White allyship is not white people taking over and making themselves leaders because they're so fervent. They just newly awakened. They just found out that racism existed a couple of months ago. You know, so it's not that.
Say something.
And it's not white splaining. Maybe we should add that to our W's.
Yes, thank you.
I mean, I'll scratch my eyes out if another newly awakened white person tries to tell me how to feel about the movement, to correct my Blackness. No, thank you. So
I think that's where the being quiet and listening is, though. I'm very afraid to like steer the conversation off in the wrong direction or whatever. I really feel there's a lot of value in listening.
Thank you, Queen Nepsa. That's so true, because I forgot to add that in there, but I've had it done to me many times, and I'm like, really, you know, and I use the word white splain, you know, and people got mad at me, you know, the fragility, and then I said, well, that's your white fragility. I just went back at it even some more because I said, you're trying to tell me how I should feel and how I should react towards racism. Like, I don't have my own right, you know, to sit there and speak about my own experiences. You just really went there, you know, so yeah. Anyway.
as far as I'm concerned. It's a form of dominance.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
so white tears is a form of dominance.
Mm-hmm. We'll have to do a whole nother 2-hour segment on white Jesus. You know, that'll be for another day. All right. Anybody else? Yes, go ahead, Nini.
I think what's important to remember if one intends to have be a white ally to Black people and people of color is courage.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to take a lot of courage, because what I'm hearing, even just in this, and I understand the wall that you come face to face with, but when you see something, when you hear a microaggression, having the courage to interject and say, hey, that's a microaggression. And, oftentimes, sure, the Black person could say it, but what happens with us is we get discredited because we're now angry Black women when we defend ourselves. And then people's discernment turns off, and they don't want to hear what what's going on with you and how to make the situation better. So having the courage to defend, you are a knight of the round table, of the Black round table in this situation. We are knighting you and asking you to go out there and fight tooth and nail to defend the Black Holy Grail. Okay, I like the Mort Arthur stories. Anyway, that's another show. But yeah, that courage that it takes to be on the front line, your front line. I was in the store last Monday, and I was shopping, and I bought a couple of masks from someone on the side of the road, and so and they didn't have very many things, but it was a Black business. I was supporting Black business, so I was like, all right, what you got, brother? I'll buy what you got. So, and I needed a change of masks, and one of them had Gucci on it. The others had all kinds of other things that I don't believe in, all these other corporate designer names. But to me, okay, I'm so anti-Gucci, so I wear it upside down a lot of time, and it's like in gold, it's just totally, it's a joke to me. I bought this. So I'm in the produce section at the Ralph's in an Orange County grocery store, and this white woman through her mask loud talks me and says, Gucci. And I looked at her like, okay, this would be interesting. And she just stood there and she kind of laughed, and I snarkily said, only the best, because to me it's a joke, that I'm wearing. I know my personal joke with this mask. She doesn't though. I don't, I guess, she's asking me. And she goes, one of my friends has, and she goes, oh, I guess if you're gonna go, something about, wearing a mask. And I'm thinking, go where? But anyway, then she says, a friend of hers has a mask that has some other high-end designer on it. And I was like, oh yeah. I said, well, I really don't like high-end designers, but I'm wearing this as a joke to myself. And she kind of did this number like, and then pushed her basket off on her way. But that was a microaggression, as subtle as it was. Her tone with me was very, I'm superior. You're going to answer me now. Gucci, what is that? Begs a rebuttal, does it not? Just that tone. And I normally would not engage, but I was like, only the best. And, I just said what I said. But if you are in the midst of that, as a white ally, you would say something, because it's now a public conversation. She's screaming through her mask, Gucci, and we're not close to each other. We're probably about 7 to 10 feet away from each other. This woman does not know me.
That's a real bummer about isolation. I wish that would happen around me. I am dying for the chance to just.
But you have to have the courage to address it, and you have to have the knowledge to know what it is that you're looking at.
One of the comments too, also real quickly, is that somebody from Facebook is saying, from Nicole Molina, white people need to commit to 100% anti-racism clapback in every situation.
Right.
Publicly, privately, always.
Yep.
And then Lynn Abrams says, be prepared to have the uncomfortable conversations.
Yeah.
So this is something that these other women are seeing as we're talking, and just contributing as far as like what makes a good white ally as well too.
Yeah.
And using the white privilege to be able to do so, you know, because there's certain things that we can't say, but other people can say because they'll listen to other white people. So we'll just be like, I'm just going to sit back and just let y'all go for it then.
White splain amongst yourselves.
Mm-hmm.
White
Right.
splain amongst yourselves. And you're going to be tested. You're going to be tested because when you come out against, you know, some sort of microaggression or aggression, racial aggression, again, you know, in favor of someone who's of color, in particular Black people, you're going to get the nigger lover moniker.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and thusly you will be treated as a nigger in that instance.
Go ahead, Mimi.
So you've got to be brave.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Go ahead, Mimi. Yeah, you said you wanted to say something.
Oh, you know, I don't remember exactly what that was, but we had a lot of fireworks this 4th of July, and there's a lot of people call the police, you gotta call the police on the firework people. But you know what? I took a back seat to caring about fireworks this year because, you know, if you guys can put up with 400 years of oppression, I can put up with one night of intense illegal fireworks. I'm not going to call the police.
All right. And yes, Mira Michelle.
I'm just feeling a lot. So I would like to give some consciousness to how much vibration and feeling is running through this group underneath all of this, and give such a deep respect for all of the women in this circle that is holding this. I mean, sometimes I'm in tears, sometimes my stomach hurts, my heart goes to this. And can you imagine that we're all walking around feeling this much about this topic? Mm-hmm. So I want to say to Black allies, to white allyship, is take courage. I love that my sister Nichelle said that. Yes, you're gonna need courage, and please reflect and educate yourself. Self-reflection and education, and then try to frame it where you speak second. Just sort of hold the space, and you may feel all this feeling going through your body like we're feeling right now, and just wait and allow that your dear one or your neighbor, whoever, just allow that. Please just take a step back and allow it to be there with you without immediately taking it personal. Put that stuff in the back seat. Give yourself a 3-minute count, 1, 2, 3 minutes, and begin to realize how you as a person, not how other people do it, but how you can begin to take a stand and stand up in those micro moments, and stand up as an understanding that it benefits everyone. Mm-hmm. At first, we need to focus on Black people and Black children. And then give yourself a holistic perspective, what our sister Alexandra said. And last but not least, heal your own wounds.
There you go.
Go back to your motherland and heal your wounds and get realized in a deeper way, because we all have to do it. And for us Black people, it's right here, you know? Thank you.
I want to say to my white and Black allies, be authentic. I need authenticity. I need realness. If you have a question, just ask. You want to know something, just ask. You know, don't make an assumption. I look at this group of women and look at the diversity. Look at the diversity. You will never ever see me in a dress. Black woman. I am a Black woman. I'm a soft Black woman who will never wear a dress. You'll always be in shorts and t-shirts or something just laid back. We have such a diversity amongst us. And what I want you to see is my authenticity, my spiritual authenticity. Because if you can see that, nothing else will matter. Mm-hmm. love me authentically, you will call me Quinlan. You won't call me the Black woman, or what would you prefer for me to identify you as? I think as long as we're authentic with each other, spiritually, we are centered, we are good to go as allies. To go as allies. So that's what I need with my relationship, my sisters, and I spell it SISTAS. The soul of a sister. So that is really important to me. That's what I need from you guys. I need more abundance of just, your energy and your spirituality and your authenticity.
Thank you. That was awesome.
I want to be able to say about allyship is that it's not a weekend warrior type thing. You don't get, this sort of short term, I did this one thing, and I think Antionette said it really well. So you got 1 or 2 scratches off, but there's like 8 more to go. And no, this is a long haul thing, but it starts with inner work, right?
That's right.
You cannot be an ally unless you're doing the inner work. So especially if you're doing any spiritual work in a community, you know that you have to be open to other people telling you what they see, because you've got blinders. We've all got blinders. When you do spiritual work, you need to be around people who are conscious enough to say, hey, but actually I noticed this. I actually noticed this. And then you take that and you internalize it and you work on yourself without the white tears, without the defense, without all that, because when you jump out to be an ally, you're not going to get it right. And knowing that, I can also say to Black people that when well-intentioned allies jump up, and they're usually like overly enthusiastic at the beginning, I haven't figured out myself yet, but we have to find a way to be more empathetic and just say, whoa, slow down a minute, and have you read this, and have you looked at that, and whatever, because sheer emotion and sheer drive is, it's almost like a distraction, It's almost like grabbing a lot of attention towards yourself because you want that pat on the back or the gold star. I'm not giving any pats on the back or the gold stars because you're not there yet, And I know that if you don't get a pat on the back or a gold star, you might feel unappreciated and then just leave after 6 weeks, which is what I expect you to do anyways, because the road is long and it's narrow and few people will actually get through it. So, but at the same time, I don't want to discourage you, do what you can, but it starts with your own internal work. Start there.
Thank you. And if any of you guys don't know, her page is really a great page to follow. She asks the simplest questions, very simple questions, and she gets a variety of people that just come with their responses. And that's just a lot of great food for thought, which also, made me, I'm going to get to you guys too, which also, as I was thinking earlier about what we were doing, and I said there were so many lessons that we had gotten from the first Zoom, and even in this Zoom itself, and even with the event, and we were dropping different links in there, and I know people were looking for more information on how we can bridge the divide, bridge the gap, have these conversations. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a page, not a group. This is going to be a public page for the world to see called Bridging the Gap. So that way we can continue with our Zooms, continue with great information, links, posts, resources. Alexandra teaches awesome, great, anti-racist teachings and classes. And we could really pull together all of our resources and make them available. And, since you ladies are here, we could all run this page, put the information out there, just have it available and stuff. So that's going to be the next movement in our step. Okay. Ashley, white allyship.
Yes.
Commitment pledges.
Yes. I want to touch on a video of Alexandra's actually that I watched that she had recorded on her Facebook last week live. And I felt like it really touched on an important point around media and what media we share and how much we allow media to control our thoughts. And that goes across the color board, but especially as allies, recognize, like, first of all, where we put our dollars and where we put our attention, and focusing on constructive things like this, as opposed to any external agenda influencing the love that we know we have and the determination that we know we have to make change. Not living in fear, but living in that determined accountability state. And Alexandra mentioned, like, you know, if we're going to share anything, any news around Black lives, how also calls to action are really important. And I felt like that was a really poignant, it was a poignant time and thing to present, you know. So, and she's in this group, so I just kind of wanted to circle back to what she said. Yeah.
Thank you. Alexandra, any final thoughts on white allyship, on pledges, or step forward?
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. Can you guys see me? My internet's cutting. Oh, thank you for mentioning that, Ashley. Thank you. Yeah, first of all, I want to say one of the things that I want to say is that from our last, I want to keep up with the pledges that we had from our last meeting. And one of my pledges was to get myself out there more with this message, because as much as I care about this message, it is also sometimes daunting to be a voice that has a lot of eyes on me with something that causes so much chargedness and brings out so much trolling and people who are just scared and fear being projected onto you. And so I will say that since our last conversation, I've been putting out on my Facebook page and letting anybody who knows me see me now or any other thing. If you think that, well, I should say that I have been starting to say yes to podcasts and being in talking in groups and letting people know that, like, if you like my message or you want me to come speak, then contact me. Don't hold back. I am answering this call even with like some really deep-seated fears about it. And so I'm ready to be doing that. I have been doing it. I've been answering that pledge, and I will continue to do that. And so when it comes to allyship, this is what I'll say. And you can take it or leave it as far as your own perspective. Right now, I practice in an oracle tradition, and right now is war. Like, I know we have fear about like what war is and what it looks like. Of course we do, but right now we are in a war. It's a spiritual war, and it's a psychological war. We're in it right now, and because of that, because of the time that we're in, we were made specifically and purposefully. Many of us, if not all of us, are warriors. We were made to be here in this time specifically. Mm-hmm. So I want everybody to remember that no matter who you are, how you identify, or how scared you are, or defensive you might be, or how confused you are, overwhelmed you are, that at the heart you are a warrior, or you support warriors. And so this is the first thing I want you to remember. And it looks different for everybody. How you can be a warrior looks different for everybody. But one element is something that I want you to get used to, and that is to be in it for life. And when we're talking about anti-racism, my number one ask for everyone is to commit to it for life. Mm-hmm. We're building a new world. This is opportunity. It doesn't look like when somebody hands you like, $1 million, or when somebody gives you a hug. Those are obvious opportunities. This is not as much of an obvious opportunities, but we have an opportunity, a very real one, to create a new world that we actually want to, that actually matches and that we're aligned with, that's aligned with our ideals right now. It's happening now. So that's what I would say. Come find me, chat with me, DM me, I'm accessible, and I will try to find that video and put it in the feed. I have a couple of things I wanted to add into this feed.
Thank
you.
So
that's what I think about allyship.
And you're absolutely right, because we are warrior women, and there are lots of warriors, men and women and children. Everybody can do things in their own way. Mm-hmm. And I remember Selassie once said in his famous speech, we must become members of a new race. And that is going to sit there and take a lifetime commitment if we are going to become members of a new race, how we're going to bridge the divide and the gap. Sommer, any final thoughts? We got 1 minute, but you can go 2 minutes.
I just want to say thank you for being here with me, all of you. And with my pledge, part of what my pledge was before is actually opening up these spaces on a more ongoing basis. And when there was a question, I think it was Alexandra that said, what are you doing with your white privilege? And for me, that's part of what I plan on continually doing. And, you know, when you were talking about the nail salon analogy, I was like, wow, I don't want to scratch off and count how many good things I'm doing for Black sisters, Black brothers. I don't want to come from some place that I'm trying to even be patted on the back. There's something about that I think gets at the white tears, the spoiled young white girl that just wants to be like, oh yeah, you're doing good. I would like to liberate that, if there's any of that exists in me in this moment, that I just, as Alexandra also just shared, to be committed for life. Like there's something that it's timeless right now for me. And I know I'm not doing enough. And I am committed to wanting to be a part of this in a powerful way too. I feel that something Ashley spoke to earlier about like a sense of not, I have felt into some of my white guilt in the last month, and recognizing where there's sort of a giving my power away. Like I do want to find a really balanced way of holding this vision for our world, a world that is like, you know, holds up that sign and celebrates Black Lives Matter. Like I see a vision of that all over this planet and other planets. I believe that we're not alone. Like on mountaintops.
Mm-hmm.
And so I come with a vision, and I pledge to continue to do my best.
Thank you. And, you know, I'm glad that you said that, because actually, when I was mentioning that before about the receipts and the stamps and everything, and my response was that when I get up to the pearly gates, when I die and get up to the pearly gates, and God asks me, what have you done? And my response would be, I tried my best.
Yep.
You know, that's all I can sit there and say, because I will never feel like enough is enough or anything. I will never be satisfied that I've done everything humanly possible or whatever. So I'm always going to try to reach and strive for more. And I won't sit there and say I've done this and that and all whatever in my life, but I will say I did try. I did try, and I tried my best. And that's going to be my answer when I get up there. So thank you, ladies. You guys are so wonderful. This is beautiful. So we'll continue this again. Like I said, I will create the page, and, you know, we'll put up our links and our resources and how we can connect together and be able to lift each other up and connect with each other. Because if nobody else will do it, at least this group sitting right here and the people tuning in, we're going to do it. Y'all can get on the train or watch us go by, but we're already on that train. So, you know, get it with it and everything. So thank you, Sommer. Yeah.
One other thing I just want to say too, in light of the pledge, is about honoring the work that's here, that's helping this world in this room. So Nepsa, I just edited the copy and included your Facebook page in the copy that's connected to this live stream right now. Alexandra, your website work, Mira Michelle, your work is there. Antionette, your work, and any of you that are here, if we can also just make sure if you have any links, references, I would like to keep that at least in the copy of this live stream that's being shared all over Facebook. So that's just one last bits of the pledge.
All righty then. So we'll go ahead and end the live stream, and then us ladies will have our little goodbyes right after.
Bye.
Bye, Facebook.
Bye. We love you.